At 17, Ella lived in the lap of luxury, raised in a grand mansion by her aunt, Evelyn, her mother's elder sister. Despite the comfort surrounding her, Ella felt caged. She didn't understand why she needed school, or why Aunt Evelyn constantly reminded her of the value of education and discipline. Ella thought she knew better. One fateful morning, Ella called her auntie to have a discussion with her. "I'm done with school. I can take care of myself," she declared. Evelyn was stunned by the defiance in her niece's eyes, the same eyes that mirrored her own. "You're throwing your future away, Ella," her aunt warned. But she ignored her, rolling her eyes in disrespect and pressing her phone, turning her back on the mansion and the life she'd been given. Ella moved to a new city, determined to prove that she didn't need anyone, least of all her aunt. The excitement of freedom quickly faded as reality set in. Living alone wasn't as easy as she imagined. Then she met Joe, a charming man who seemed to be everything she had been missing. Joe made her feel special, loved, and secure. He promised her the world, and Ella, young and naive, believed every word. Months passed, and Ella fell deeply for Joe. It wasn't until she discovered she was pregnant that her world began to unravel. When she told Joe the news, his expression changed. The warmth in his eyes faded. "I can't be a part of this," he muttered before walking out of her life. Ella, devastated, later learned from a neighbor that Joe had a wife and 2 children in a town not far from where they lived. Crushed by betrayal, she had no choice but to return to her aunt's mansion. She stood at the gate, her belly growing, hoping that Aunt Evelyn would understand and take her back. But when Evelyn saw her, a look of disgust crossed her face. "I told you, Ella. You made your bed, now lie in it. You're not welcome here anymore," Evelyn said coldly, slamming the door. She cried and begged, but it was rather too late. Auntie Evelyn ordered the security to throw her out of her mansion and never allow her step foot into the compound ever again. Ella was left to wander the streets, lost and ashamed. With no home and no money, she began hawking fruits to survive. Day after day, she stood under the scorching sun, calling out to passers-by, her dreams of a better life shattered. Years went by, and her situation only worsened. She met a man named Ken, a poor laborer who barely had enough to feed himself, let alone a family. Desperate and with no other options, Ella accepted his proposal. She married him, moving into a run-down shack on the outskirts of town. Her life had taken a turn she never could have imagined. From a mansion to a life of hardship, Ella realized too late the consequences of her youthful choices. But her story was far from over. After marrying Ken, Ella's life continued in a downward spiral. Living in a tiny, run-down shack, she faced the harshness of poverty daily. Ken, though kind, struggled to provide for them. His menial job as a laborer paid very little, and as her pregnancy progressed, she realized they could barely feed themselves, let alone a child. Despite the suffering, Ella refused to give up. She returned to hawking fruits on the streets, even as her belly grew larger. Every day, she stood in the heat, her feet swollen, her back aching, but she persevered. The memory of her past life in the mansion haunted her as she watched wealthier women drive by in fancy cars, a reminder of what she had lost. One evening, as she rested by the roadside after a long day of hawking, an older woman approached her. The woman, who introduced herself as Mary, was a street vendor who had once been in her shoes. She offered Annabeth some advice. "You can't let your mistakes define your future," Mary said. "I was once like you, lost, ashamed, but I found a way out. You can too." Mary encouraged Ella to stop feeling sorry for herself and focus on creating a better future for her child. Inspired, Ella began saving whatever little she could. She sold more fruits and gradually learned to sew from Mary, who had a small tailoring business. Ella soon began taking small tailoring jobs, earning just enough to dream of a better life. Ken supported her as best as he could, but the weight of their poverty strained their relationship. She knew that she had to be strong, not just for herself, but for the baby she was expecting. Days turned into months, and slowly, she started building a new life, one stitch at a time. Though her life was far from perfect, Ella had learned a valuable lesson. She could still make something of herself, even in the most difficult of circumstances. With determination, she began planning for a small tailoring business of her own. Her journey was not yet complete, and there were still many challenges ahead. But this time, Ella knew she had the strength to face them. The moral lesson of this story is, your mistakes may shape your path, but they don't have to define your future. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more life-changing tales, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories. See you next time.